Today, we'll be diving into the world of UI Builder to build a custom application from scratch. UI Builder is a low-code, no-code graphical interface tool that enables users to create custom web interfaces and applications on the ServiceNow platform. It's one of those features within ServiceNow that I get asked about most often, so sit tight and by the end of the video, you should be equipped to create your very own UI Builder experience. Our use case would be a live auction/bidding application, and the idea is that users can list an item for auction and then multiple users can start to bid for the item. I got inspiration from one of my customers who wanted to build an application to allow their employees to create an internal marketplace for products and services. I'll start with a prototype in Figma to give you an idea of what we'll be building. We need an image of the bid item, then the name and description of that item. Next, we want the user to see what the current bid price is, an input box where the user can enter the bid, and below it, a table showing the last 3 bids. For ease of use, we'll include a list below showing all the other active bids as well. So great, with this prototype, let's start building. You guessed it, we are back in App Engine Studio. Let's create a new app and call this Live Auction. We'll first add a new blank table that will store the items for bidding. We need fields for item name, item description, the item image, and expiry date of the bid. We also need the starting bid amount and a true/false field to indicate that the bid is active. Now let's add a second table, and this table will store every bid against the bid item. We will need a reference field, and this will tie each bid record to the bid item, and then the bid amount. Now we have our data structure, we'll format to include the bid on the bid item form. And let's create a sample bid for our test. So that looks good, but before we get into UI Builder, I'll create a flow that will set the starting bid for every bid item. So what this flow does is it takes the initial bid amount from the field that we created and then create a bid with that amount against the bid item. You can choose to do this with a business rule, but this was the easiest way for me. So I'm testing to see if it all works on our test item, and that looks good. We're all set, on to the main show. We'll first add a portal experience, which is based on UI Builder. As this is considered a template, you can see that a number of template pages were already created as part of the experience. Instead, what we need is a new blank page, so we will select Create a New Page. When creating a page, we can define required and optional parameters, and this is extremely important for you to link pages, as well as use these parameters in the context of data elements, which we will see a bit later on. Here, I need one required parameter to store the sysid of the bid item to be displayed on the page. You can always add new parameters later on. Let's park aside audiences for the moment and create this page. To start, we will paste the sysid of our test record into the required parameter so we can preview it as we are building the page. Next, we will format the layout of the page by adding multiple containers to match our prototype. I'll use a mix of flexbox and grid layout types with simple configurations to get this to a 2-column stacked on 1-column layout. Now we can start adding components in each container. The top left box will hold our bid item image. And now in the top right box, we'll start by adding in 2 stylized text components. Each of these will also be nested in containers. In the Utah release, we can duplicate components, and that makes our lives much easier. Next component will display the highest bid. Below that, our input field that will allow the user to enter the bid amount, followed by a bid button that will submit the bid. Let's preview in a new window what we have created so far. This looks good, but we're not quite there yet. Back to UI Builder, adding the section to display the last 3 bids. And we can work on some simple CSS to make the page a little more pleasing to the eye. And this looks fantastic. We have what we need except for the related bits, which we will do at the end. It's time to hook up these different page elements to data resources and custom logic. The first data resource to be created is to get the required information of the bit item via our parameter sysID. I'll create the lookup record data resource, and for table, it will always be the same, which is the bit item table, so we can hardcode that in. Now we can pass in the sysID from the required parameter into the record field. Lastly, we will define which fields to be returned from the record. We will choose all the custom fields that we created in the bit item table. You can see all the return data from the output on the right. With this data resource, we can map it to the relevant components. The first is the title. Next is the item description. Then we want to display the image that we uploaded against the item image field. So okay, this looks good in our preview. Let's work on it a little bit more for the formatting so the page displays nicely. Our next data resource will be to look up all the related bits against the bit item. We select lookup records this time, and for table, we select bit. You can see that this time around there is a filter condition, which is what we will use to define as the bit item reference field, taking in the sysID of our parameter for the bit item. Then we return the bit amount, and we see that there is only one bit here, which was our starting bit that was created via our flow when we tested it earlier. The next part is very important, which is that we want to order the return bits via the bit amounts from highest to the lowest. So we will choose order to be bit amount and the sort type to be descending. Since we only want to show the last 3 bits, we can enter 3 as max results. Okay, let's create a few more bits on the backend for us to preview later, with the highest bit at $800. We will now work on displaying the highest bit. First, let's figure out how to return the highest bit. Since our lookup bits data resource is sorted by the highest bit first, returning the first object in the array will give us $800. With this knowledge, we want this to be more readable, so let's script the output to return a string saying the current bit is X amount dollars. So that works perfect. I'll just change this to green for readability. Moving on to display the last 3 bits, for this, we will use the repeater component, one of the most useful components released in San Diego. This takes a data array and repeats the output in the nested components. We will create a 3-column container within the repeater, which will show when the bit was made, who made the bit, and for how much. You can see how we are hooking the item level data resource to each of these stylized text components. What should then happen is that this will return the latest up to 3 bits of our lookup records data array created earlier. Awesome, this looks great so far, and we are that much closer to our final product. To implement the bit feature, there are a number of steps that we have to take. The first thing to do is add a validation pattern to the input text field to ensure that the user enters only decimal-based numbers. To do this, we put in a regex pattern that will run this validation. You can see that when we enter non-numerical values, it marks an error. Next, we create a client state parameter that will store the value of the text once the user clicks outside of the input text box. We'll call this client state bit amount. We then add an event mapping for input value set and choose the update the bit amount client state parameter with the payload value. I'll temporarily hook up this client state to a test text field so you can see what we are doing in real time. Notice that every time we enter a new value and click outside the box, it will capture the value and update this text field. So cool, we now know that this works. Now to create a bit using the bit button, what we need to do is first disable the bit button whenever the entered bit amount is lower than the highest bit amount. We do this by writing a simple if script for this validation that will return a true or false value on the disabled configuration for the button. This will compare the return highest value against the bit amount client state that we created in the previous step. Now you see if we entered amount less than $800, which is the highest bit, the button gets disabled. Adding a value higher than $800 will enable it to be clicked. For a better user experience, I'm also adding an error message that will display following the logic that we just covered. This time, the script will run on the component visibility configuration. Nice. Now it's time to work on the functionality to actually create the bid against the bid item. We will add a new data resource for create record. Next, a client script that will trigger this data resource. The create record GraphQL takes in values for the table to create the record on, and template fields which we will use to pass in the bid amount, the bidder, as well as the bid item. With this, all we need to do now is add the button clicked event to trigger the script. So let's test with a new bid amount of $850. After clicking bid, we can navigate back to the bid item record and you can see a new bid created for record 1019 with amount of $850. However, I think you would have noticed that nothing actually happened on the UI when we clicked the button until we did a refresh of the page. Then only will we see the values refresh. Obviously, this is not ideal in a live bidding scenario. So let's fix this and we will create a record watcher data resource. Our goal is to refresh the data resources, which will update the page by polling for changes on the bid table. So we will enter bid for the table, and for filter conditions, we are looking at record updates for bids related to the contextual bid item. Now, we will select that whenever a new message is received from this record watcher, matching those filter conditions, we will refresh the lookup bids data resource. Testing this, you can now see that every time we enter a new bid on the bid table, the current bid, validation, and last 3 bids update dynamically without having to refresh the page. So that's perfect, we've nailed this requirement. A bonus small feature that I want to implement is also to clear the field value whenever a bid is submitted. How I approach this is to map the value field on the input text to an empty client state. And then, after we executed the button click script, we update this blank client state which will clear out the field. And that looks like it's working. We're pretty much done at this point. The last feature to add is to display a list of all active bids. We'll add a simple list component. This will display records from our bid item table, and we will only filter bid items that are active. I'll create another sample bid item so we can see the 2 records in the list. We will hook up the reference link clicked event to link the user to the bid item record page by passing the sys ID of the bid item into that required parameter that we created right at the start. Now you see that when we click on the record, it will navigate to that bid item page. Congrats on making it with me to the end. We'll quickly create an audience with the required role in this custom app, and then assign users to this audience. Now all that's left to do is to test out our application. I'll log in as 2 different users, and we are going to enter a bidding war for this chair. So it's just as simple as this. Every time one person makes a bid, the other person logged in real time can see the updated bids and counter bid against him. What I've covered today is barely scratching the surface of the possibilities with UI Builder, but I hope you see what a powerful tool this is and can be for you with the custom use cases that you want to build. Until next time, this is Shao, no code, no problem.